So I went to DAV College, studied pre-engineering there. Countries are becoming independent. India was one of the first countries to become independent. There was an experiment. How do you go from where India was to where India would aspire to be?
After so many years, we are still in that developing phase. What do you think, what other things Punjab must do to excel in that area and avoid this brain drain concept that is happening in,
Basic economics is very simple. It's not a magical formula how you develop.
So there's a lot of debate going around about sustainability and development and growth. So what kind of knowledge, what should be preferred by the policymakers of countries like India? Imagine shaping the economic destinies of nation, advising governments, fighting poverty at a global scale, and witnessing world's biggest development experiments from the inside. Today, we have a rare privilege of sitting with a personality who has done this all, Mr. Inder Sood, a distinguished economist and former director of World Bank. From the villages of India to the corridors of World Bank, he has seen what works, what fails, and what truly triumphs all. In this episode of Horizon Talks, we will be talking about the real story behind global economics. Welcome to the DAV University, sir. It is an absolute honor to have you here with us. Sir, my audience are I think they will be curious to know about your personal journey and what led you to choose economics.
That's an interesting question because I grew up in Jalandhar, of course, this is my hometown. I thought I was going to be an engineer, like most young people do, engineer or doctor or something in those days. So I went to DAV College, studied pre-engineering there. Then I went to Chandigarh and studied mechanical engineering there. And then I thought, well, it'll be nice to go abroad, go to the US and get a master's degree. And I did go to Stanford University, which is not a bad place to be. And after a year, I needed some more money because it's pretty expensive to go there. I worked for a year. Then I came back and I thought the economics seemed more interesting to me because when I worked in the manufacturing context, I kept thinking about the economics of this. So I took my studies more in the direction of economics. Now in the US, we have the advantage of people are much more flexible in terms of, and I got a PhD still labeled as engineering economic systems, but with a lot of economics in there. So it was more an evolution of thinking rather than some guidance for me that I must do economics. And it's turned out to be a good decision for me.
Yeah. Sir, what are your views on world development, having said your background in India and then working in US?
Well, as you can say, my work was not really in the US because the US is where I was based. It was a start of development process, 1971 when I joined the World Bank. Countries were becoming independent. India was one of the first countries to become independent. There was an experiment. How do you go from where India was to where India would aspire to be? So I was I could say at the early phase of development thinking. How do countries develop? Now I was lucky that my early assignments took me to the Far East. Korea, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and so on. And what I saw there really impressed me. And I was also, at that time, coming to India from time to time, sometimes in personal visits, sometimes in official. And I said, what is the difference? Why these countries are growing so fast? There's nothing, we have smarter people than those countries. So I drew my initial lessons from East Asia. The success stories. We wrote a book one time, my colleagues, called East Asian Miracle. And the East Asians used to like that book, but their only objection was, miracle sounds like something came from heaven. But it was man-made. On the other hand, I must say, increasingly disappointed in India. We got the term called, derisively, Hindu rate of growth. That meant low growth, high poverty, and so on. So I think my experiences were really formed by East Asia. What makes a country succeed? The other good fortune I had is China opened up to the World Bank in 1980 when Deng Xiaoping came. And it was very new. With China, everybody wanted to see China, what's happening in China. And I worked in China for several years, countries. And again, when people see China today, I say it to them, I'm not at all surprised. Determined people who knew what they want to do. I wouldn't want to live in their political system, but they're very clear. So I think development thinking has evolved over time. There's still a deep division of growth versus poverty and so on, and we could talk about that. But I think fundamentally countries have to grow. So without growth, there's no poverty reduction.
After so many years, we are still in that developing phase, and whereas our counterparts are much ahead of us. We are comparing ourselves to our, who are lesser than us, not who are, further than us.
Well, I think India has a lot of catching up to do. In India, we had under the narrow governance was you could call it a center of left government, more socialist rather than capitalist. I mean, we really believed in the government being the decider. I'm slightly exaggerating, but by and large, we were state-driven development, five-year plans, this and that. I think, looking back, and even then I had some doubts about it, government cannot develop countries. They can make policy, they can make frameworks. Development has to come from the private sector. Yeah, sure. You have to think about that development does not bypass the poor. And that's where the term Amrita Sen raised of development with a human face. So how do you make growth translate into prosperity for the average person? That's a challenge that India should. But we got much more into state-led development. And I think, if I am forgiven by my Indian friends, that has failed. The government cannot develop. In fact, even in a college like yours here, UGC telling you what to do and all that is a failed model. So I think now finally India is recognizing that we've been left behind. From what I see, without getting into politics, India is doing what it should have done 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I think that's the difference.
Sir, since you have, you are the native of Punjab, and once Punjab was called Sone di Chidi, and now we have slipped to the, GDP index of 18, at the 18th spot. What do you think, what other things Punjab must do to excel in that area and avoid this brain drain concept that is happening in,
Do you have an hour for me? I think you asked a very good question. Punjab should have been at the forefront of development because I also believe healthy agriculture brings other things in development. So Punjab is the bread basket of India, or was at the bread basket of India. Unfortunately, and I must say it continues even to this day, and we used to say, oh, Punjab is very good, South India have taken things away from us. They're much more advanced than we are because they're following the true sense of development of government that functions for people. That means a government that can pick up your garbage, a government that can maintain your sewers, But Punjab has gotten itself into now people will blame it on terrorism and this and that. But I think fundamentally we have suffered from poor governance. In my mind, sitting outside, we've not been lucky. One chief minister asked me one time, I won't name him, political considerations. So I said to him, what I see as an outsider, every 5 years, people change the government. Throw out the incumbents and bring the new one, and that cycle goes on. That means people are dissatisfied. So you might as well do the right thing. Right thing sometimes is difficult. It's difficult to make people pay for water. It's difficult to make people realize that you have to maintain roads, therefore you must raise revenues. So it's a vicious cycle we're in. I mean, the Punjab cities are literally fourth world cities right now. So I think Punjab has been left behind by poor leadership, and I hope people who are in the leadership don't think badly of me. But I really do think that we suffer from bad leadership.
Sir, I take it as constructive criticism. I feel like they should, follow something from your intellect and learn from us, from you.
Well, the basic economics is very simple. It's not a magical formula how you develop. You basically got to have the right policies, which means you encourage private initiative and the government cannot, so we should stay away from investing in plants of milk and all that. Let the private sector do it. The second role of the government is education. I mean, what East Asians did is, we had a conference one time where we had written a book, the World Bank had called the East Asian Miracle. Unki suggestions, they think, why do you call it a miracle? That makes it sound like somebody God-given. It's a simple thing. You maintain your fiscal discipline, you spend what you have, don't borrow more than what you should. You should educate your children, particularly women, in there, and you should stay open to the outside world. Very simple. I think that's what we need. India is doing parts of it, at least what I see in the Modi government. They're opening up, they're doing infrastructure. To what extent the regulatory framework has changed and all that, I'm not so sure. But I think we're on the right path. But now the states have to take ownership. We cannot be run from the center also. Delhi cannot run. I mean, I was used to be appalled when universities would tell me that such and such authority in the center had to clear our syllabus. That's ridiculous. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic, but it breaks my heart to see Punjab. Punjab has a lot of dynamism. I mean, I see industries, factories all over the place. Our farmers are producing fantastic crops. But I think the environment of governance is what Punjab needs. We need local. I would make each municipality autonomous. I would tell them, it's your problem. You know, it's not the Chandigarh problem. If you're the mayor of Jalandhar, be accountable to people of Jalandhar. And then people have to be told, nothing in life is free. You're not going to be pay zero charges for water and expect running water. So I think leaders can bring people along. People understand. I mean, I think it's a governance issue to be more first and foremost.
So talking about the miracles, what project you feel you have been a part of that you feel paved the path of development?
Well, East Asia was one of them, but China. When I first went to China in 1980, people go to Shanghai now talk about beautiful city. Shanghai was nothing. There was bicycles all over. There was not even sewer system in Shanghai. I think leadership matters. Leadership matters. So the model, as I think, is very simple. The government should build infrastructure, educate people, or help educate people, or help the private sector educate people, and be open to the world. Exports, trade, this. And I think that's the formula which has worked for China, that has worked for East Asia, and there's no reason why it won't. And it is working. I mean, I don't want to be all pessimistic. I do see rays of hope now in Indian economic making. It is not a country which is now run by planning commission. You know, it's a far too large country to be run from Delhi, just like Punjab is far too large to be run from Chandigarh.
Yes. So talking about ideology, who do you prefer, Adam Smith or John Keynes?
That's a good question. I think, both ideologies have something to offer. Both ideologies have. I do believe development should have, and growth should have a consequence for the average person. If the growth is bypassing you, it's no good, So both were right. The question is, what's the right balance? The question always is, what is the role of the government? Which is not too much, not too little. And finding the right balance is important. And so I think Adam Smith had the invisible hand, and we all believe in that. So I think it's too simplistic to say it's one or the other. Maybe in the 1940s after independence, we thought that we were one side or the other. But in reality, I think both offer ideas in today's world that we should adopt.
Sir, a few days back, I was watching this podcast which talks about functioning poverty. Like they were comparing the poverty of US and the poverty of India. In US, they said that people are just lying, dependent on the free ships given by the government, no housing and everything. But in India, they have settled to, live in small spaces, and they are being productive out of that. So your views on that?
I've not heard of that categorization. I tend to not believe in stereotyping people. I think we have a lot of misunderstandings about poverty. Poor people work. First of all, it's a myth that poor people don't work. They work. And I think the idea that somehow they are living in a vicious cycle and they don't want, I've not seen anywhere. Poor people have the same ambitions that you and I do. They want to educate their children. They want their next generation to be better than they are. What is important is what kind of hand do they need, And that is a tricky question. You don't want to do too much so become dependent on you. You want to do too little that it's meaningless. And what that is what good leaders decide and convey to people. Communication. When Deng Xiaoping was in China, he would use phrases like, we cannot all eat from the same bowl. What he's really saying is, government cannot provide. Yes, so I think communication, leadership, and from what I see of Modi, without getting into the politics of all this, I think he seems to be that sort of leader. I had the opportunity to meet him 10 years back or 15 years back when he was chief minister. And I was quite impressed with his ability to communicate and form ideas. And I still remember some of my conversations with him. And I said, this is a rare chief minister. Just to give you the flavor of this, if you go to the Punjab chief minister's house, most likely there'll be Mela people outside with petitions and trying to get that. And I went there on Saturday, there was his PA and a security person. Nobody asking for favors. So I think governance, leadership matters. Leadership matters.
Okay, sir, in this present world, how do you think that the ideology of Karl Marx is still relevant? Is it functional to, relate to that?
Well, Karl Marx, in some ways, is not relevant. But to the extent you say Karl Marx was arguing distribution, I think in economics called Paul Streeton is growth with distribution, which is a concept which we talked about earlier. It's a tricky, but how do you make sure that you don't leave people behind? But how you make sure that you're not unrealistic and thinking that you're going to solve poverty? I think poverty problem has to be solved by the poor themselves. What we have a responsibility, who are not in that category, is to make sure the enabling environment is there, that their kids can go to school, and we don't have a elite school system. But then we also don't have a bad school system. I tell people, if you go to a private school, many children are coming from poor families. They're paying tuition, which I find unimaginable that how would they pay. So they have ambitions like everyone else. We've got to make sure we fulfill that ambition, but without making them dependent on the government.
But sir, the economic divide is still there. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer in this economy of India.
I taught for a while. I used to say, that's a kind of a catchy phrase. The rich are becoming richer and the poor are becoming poorer. The real phrase should be, the rich are getting richer, the poor are not getting as poor as they were before. So the rising vote does lift everybody. There's no question about that. I mean, I look around in Jalandhar, all the traffic and all I see, there are a lot of people who are making a living and doing CFI. Right? But it is a question of, again, leadership. I mean, East Asia has done it, that you don't have to. I would say in India, we have not found that balance as yet, or what is enough, but that is not too much. If the people become too dependent on the government, then it's a problem.
So how do institutes like World Bank can contribute to the development projects of India like Viksit Bharat?
The answer I would have given you 20 years ago is different than the answer I'd give you today. I think at the macro level, India is on the right track. This building of infrastructure, opening up to the trade, having an open economy is the right direction. I think the next generation of reforms in India should be at the state and local level. Delhi cannot run India. We are far too. So what do you do that enables states, and more importantly, even cities? I talked to some mayor. The cities are dysfunctional here. And I would say, I would draw a line and say, this is your responsibility. You are free to tax within these limits. But we should not try to micromanage them. I think the chief ministers are still too much controlling cities. So I think a decentralized model is what India needs. In the states which are much... Now, I see that happening in some parts of India. But regrettably, I don't see them in the northern belt of India as yet.
So states like Jharkhand, Bihar, UP, even Punjab, they need that kind of development project that creates employment, because unemployment right now is the biggest, problem of our generation.
Well, we used to call them Bimaru states, BIMARU states, for a good. I think, again, if you take the view that employment is not going to be created by the government, employment is going to be created by the private sector. So do we have the right environment for the private sector to flourish? Do we have controls which are not enough, but not too much? Are we taking care of the environment, again, which is corruption, governance? If you have to bribe an inspector that comes every time to your factory, you're retarding development. So and there's not going to be a textbook that's going to tell us how to do it. It's going to be leadership in the end. We got to find leaders who are interested and able to think beyond narrow interests. And I think that's what my hope is in my lifetime.
So what are your views about the education qualification of a leader? What makes a good leader? Because we have been talking about governance.
No, I don't think education. I think it's leadership is something which is, I'm sounding, sorry. in you. Are you the quality of leader? Maybe your psychology department or something will tell us. Leadership is bringing people. We had leaders. Nehru was a leader. I mean, I tell people, one thing I can say about Nehru, whatever you can criticism might have, if he had wanted power, he could have given himself as much power as he had wanted, and we would have given it to him. But he was a man who had studied in reasonably good universities and all that. So leadership comes, I think, but there is something innate about leadership in my mind, that it's not education quality. Obviously, you want people who are educated, but I don't see a correlation between leadership skills and education. It's innate in you. It's maybe you are tomorrow's leader, but so. I see it as a qualitative leadership. Either you have it or you don't have it. And at least what I assessed in my country with Modi, I was saying, yeah, this man is a leader, and he's proven it to be.
So there's a lot of debate going around about sustainability and development and growth. So what kind of knowledge, what should be preferred by the policymakers of countries like India?
Well, I think we know what basically. We are on an unsustainable environmental path. So I see a lot of action on the energy side. That's where the biggest thruster thing is. Solar energy, which India is doing. I think there's a good news on that side, at least what I see, that there's a much more aware. I mean, the US is a little bit of a outlier now, where Trump says, he doesn't want to. But I think energy efficiency of energy use is very important in transport. So you trend towards electric, less reliance on coal, more different types of agriculture, so these are all things known. And I think I'm optimistic in that side. And that doesn't mean global warming is about to stop tomorrow. But if we are taking the right actions on energy, on agriculture, on mining, I think at least our grandchildren will be able to live in a cleaner world.
Sir, do you think we'll be able to achieve those sustainable goals by 2030?
I think I have to consult my astrologer on that. I don't know. I mean, I think it's good to set ambitious goals, be monitoring yourself. But the one thing I don't want to do is we set a rigid goal and be held to it. I think we have to understand this is a much more difficult problem than we as human beings can understand. And I think as long as the needle is going in the right direction, we should be happy.
Sure. So let's, at the last, I want to ask, what kind of message do you want to give the younger generation who wants to go into economics, or even in general, who are interested in economics?
Well, I think what you're doing is what I would suggest to anybody. Just get a good general education, be open to the world, be curious. Don't worry about, I think sometimes our system doesn't allow you to do that, but we can't blame the system always. If you're going direction of one and you want to change, it's a journey you're on. I don't like the system of in grade 10 deciding I'm going to be an engineer or a doctor. You might have a goal in that direction, but my experience is opportunities come, and be ready to seize them. And don't be bound by stigma. Kya kahenge? Maine ye kar diya to kya kahenge? You're free in that sense. So I think I'm very bullish about the young people in India.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It was a very insightful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. I think I went over script there for a few times, but it was a very good session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.